Joan of Arc was burned alive on May 30th, 1431 CE, something no one ever aspires to have written on their obituary. Think about the intensity of that. She was tied to a stake, most likely with rope. Heretics were either tied to a pillar or stake or chain. Bundles of sticks were placed beneath her around the base. And then the wood was set on fire. Sometimes an executioner would help the heretic along by essentially hanging them while the fire got going beneath them, hitting them across the chest with a club to speed up their demise. This doesn't seem to be the case with Joan. She wasn't that lucky. There's a chance that she died, or at least she passed out from smoke inhalation before the fire got her, or she didn't. And the last thing she felt on this earth was the lick of those flames, burning, searing, cooking her flesh. One legend of her burning says she was actually burned 3 times. That she died during the first time, but it took 2 additional burnings to destroy her organs. Whether it took once, twice, 3 times, she was only 19 years old when she was tried for heresy, found guilty, and then burned. She'd been captured fighting for her beloved France during the 100 Years' War between the French and English crowns, a war she helped win for France. And then the monarch she fought for, the one that she put on the throne, essentially abandoned her. Joan was a deeply religious young woman who believed God himself commanded her to fight, and she was so adamant about being one of God's chosen warriors and so convincing that her mission was bestowed upon her from above that this rural peasant girl persuaded Charles VII to let her lead troops against the English and their allies to claim the throne of France for him. And today, over 600 years after her birth, nearly 600 years since her death, we dig deep into the life and times of the young warrior that became one of France's most enduring and beloved figures today on Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Happy Monday, Time Suckers. Happy Memorial Day. Finally, I remember a holiday, always tricky when I'm not recording on the day that the episode comes out. Please take a moment today to recognize those who have sacrificed their lives, made the ultimate sacrifice, defending freedom here in the United States, those who have died fighting for their own nations, worldwide and throughout history, people such as Joan of Arc. Thank you also for clicking play. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for rating and reviewing. Thanks for letting us suck. Slap your noggin, week to sucking week. I'm Dan Cummins, a.k.a. the Suck Master. You are listening to Timesuck. Welcome to the cult of the curious. Hail Nimrod. Timesuck is brought to you today by AmeriGas. AmeriGas specializes in bottled American farts. And they're giving away free fart bottles to the first Timesuckers to call into 1-800-AMERICAN-FART-BOTTLE. Did you know you could heat your entire home on the consequences of the poor dietary decisions of other Americans? That's ridiculous. No. AmeriGas sells propane to fuel your grill, you silly goose. It's grilling season. Get some burgers. Get some steaks, some chicken breasts, some shrimps, some salmons, some fishes, some other meats, some other delightful meats, and put them on your grill and put them in your mouth. And I have an exciting opportunity for Time Suckers. AmeriGas Cylinder Exchange is giving away a Weber grill to one lucky person. It's very easy to register to win. You go to mytimesuckgrill.com, mytimesuckgrill.com, enter your name and email address, and that's it. Doesn't get simpler. mytimesuckgrill.com, enter to win an awesome prize, thanks to AmeriGas. The contest runs through July 4th, so you're going to have your brand new Weber Spirit 2 E210 2-burner propane gas grill. That's when you get to win it. $400 grill for free. I registered, and I'll be honest, I hope I win, which is probably not legal. It's probably not legal for me to win. So my email is probably going to be tossed out, but yours won't. You can pick your AmeriGas tanks at your local Home Depot, Dollar General Store, so many other locations nationwide. In Houston, San Diego, Knoxville, and Tulsa, AmeriGas actually has vending machines, gas vending machines at Walmarts to make it very easy. So this Memorial Day, if this is when you're hearing this, or after Memorial Day, if you're hearing it later, while you're cleaning off your old grill, make sure you register to let me give you a brand new grill, a Weber. Go to mytimesuckgrill.com. Again, register to win. AmeriGas sponsoring the show for the next 6 weeks. You're going to have plenty of chances. And the winner, again, announced right after the 4th on July 6th. That's when July 6th, right after July 4th, is when the winner is announced. And you have up to the 4th to do it. And again, exchange your tanks at Home Depot's, Walmart's, Dollar General, 7-Elevens, and more. Enter to win a new Weber grill. Go to timesuckgrill.com. Also, Timesuck brought to you by the Tom and Dan 2019 Cruise. Tickets still available. to a mediocre time with Tom and Dan. Their cruise March 7th through 11th, Cape Canaveral, Florida. You just go to tomanddancruise.com, grab your cabin. There's not that many left. It's going to be sold out. Get a huge discount on a really fun cruise that I will be on, doing a podcast, I'm sure, with the T&D gang. Lindsay's going to be there. Going to be a lot of day drinking, a lot of ruckus happening. You can easily access the website for the cruise with tons of other info and the AmeriGas Grill giveaway by going to the sponsor section of either timesuckpodcast.com or the app, the Timesuck app. Just push the button. We try to make it easy for you here on Timesuck. In the Suck Dungeon today, surrounded by the artwork. The Timesuck community is sent in here to the Suck Dungeon. People sending stuff into P.O. Box 3891, CDA, Idaho 83816. It's so nice. I'm so thankful. Recording in a cocoon of support, and it feels good. And I'm here with the Reverend Dr. Josh Krell. He's always making this sound so sweet. And throw myself under the bus today during today's Timesucker update, so stay tuned for that. Turns out I may have been last week's idiot of the internet. And my Japanese pronunciation abilities may be sorely lacking. Not entirely surprising since I don't speak Japanese and have never studied anything thoroughly going on in that country. Thanks to Aaron, Adam, and the gang at the Galena Mine in Wallace, Idaho for taking Lindsay and I a mile underground a week ago. That was so awesome to see where zinc, lead, copper, silver, and more has been mined for 130 years. Got to hold a mining tool about a mile underground. Very cool. All because of Timesuckers. And looking forward to the Timesuckers coming to the Suck Dungeon tomorrow afternoon, May 29th, 3 to 7 p.m., little open house at 2215 East Sherman Ave, Suite 109, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 83814. Probably going to do some wrestling. What is big deal? So we wrestle. This Timesuck show love. We wrestle, we stroke, we love, we support. It's going to be great. Thanks you suckers for taking advantage of the Memorial Day sale. Man, everything's about wiped out. Getting that 25% off with the Heroes discount at checkout. You got until midnight tonight if you haven't done it. And I got some really fucking kick-ass merch coming this way into the store soon. I'm really stoked for the new stuff. And Lindsay and I will be in Phoenix just a few days, May 31st through June 3rd, Flat Earth Tour, rolling into the Tempe Improv. Garth Reynolds from the Dollop Podcast, doing some kick-ass stand-up as well. And then next week, DC heads to DC. DC plus DC equals Flat Earth jokes getting told in our nation's capital. June 8th and 9th, going to be at the Draft House in Washington, D.C. 15th and 16th of June, going to be in Des Moines, the Funny Bone, 2 nights only. Tickets on sale there as well. And if you're a new listener, no, I'm not a flat earther. I'll be mocking it. July 12th and 14th, heading to Orlando, back to the Improv, joining Tom and Dan there on the 15th for a live Timesuck. Comedy Store in La Jolla, July 20, 22nd, Dayton, Ohio, July 27, 28. So much more at dancummins.tv. And now, time for some medieval warfare nonsense. Let's suck on some Joan of Arc. Joan was born at the beginning of the 15th century in a little village in northeastern France during a period of confusion and turmoil. Her father worked with rabbits designing corn mazes. Her mother taught puppets to speak Portuguese. And that is nonsense. We're going to get into the specifics of her birth and life in a timeline here in a bit. Joan was born during the 100 Years' War between France and England, and intermittent struggles in the series of battles lasted well over 100 years, actually. Took place during the 14th and 15th centuries and revolved around a variety of disputes, a big one being the question of the legitimate succession to the French crown. Love it when we go Game of Thrones here in the Suck. House Lannister versus House Stark versus House Targaryen versus House Donald McRonald. God, I wish that last one was a real Game of Thrones house. Struggle over what land belonged to which kingdom involved several generations of English and French claimants to the crown. The official start date to this particular war is 1337 CE. But there had been periodic fighting over the question of English fiefs in France going back to the 12th century. When King Henry I of England had laid claim to some land in modern-day France, he had taken from his brother, Robert Curthose, who was Duke of Normandy. Felt he had a blood right to a little patch of, France here and a little patch of France there. Henry and Robert were the sons of William the Conqueror, a.k.a. Wilbur the Vanquisher, a.k.a. Bilber the Trouncer, a.k.a. I'll show myself out. William was a Norman king who was born in modern-day France and conquered England in 1066 CE after his first cousin, Edward the Confessor, died. Edward had named a powerful English earl, Harold Godwinson, to be his successor. Harold was not his son. Edward was childless, so William fought for the open throne and he took it, ending the long reign of Anglo-Saxon kings in England, starting a new Norman succession. Claims to the throne, man, so many various claims to the throne, the cause of so many wars. So many people have died throughout history because of convoluted European bloodlines, fighting for the local castle owner, prince, earl, baron, etc., who either, felt they had a rightful claim to some throne or county or province. Sometimes men who didn't have a claim but just felt like they could take it, fought for it. And their soldiers followed them into battle, hoping a victory would improve their shitty medieval status, get a little land for themselves, no longer just be a shit-eating, bottom-dwelling peasant. Now they could maybe sleep in an unair-conditioned house of stone instead of an unair-conditioned house of wood. Have the doctor use the good leeches on them when they came around for some bloodletting. Life was terrible. Thanks to numerous political marriages used to solidify allegiances between kingdoms through bloodlines, or to expand kingdoms through bloodlines, medieval Europe had a whole lot of, this guy is the king of this kingdom, but also is the prince of that kingdom, and he's technically the duke of this province, and as the nephew to this other king who didn't produce a son, is now third in line to that crown. So, naturally, a lot of fighting because of this. Suddenly, your country could technically belong to a rival country's monarchy when your king dies through some legitimate or quasi-legitimate blood claim to the throne, and you might not care for that. That didn't always set well with the locals when some foreign king suddenly became the heir to their throne, and a war would break out, and they'd fight, off the foreign throne claimer rather than just hand over their kingdom to a leader they weren't familiar with, or maybe they didn't like, or maybe they didn't feel had a legitimate claim. Maybe this duke felt he could make more money under this king than that king, and so he'd pick his allegiance that way. There was a lot of that. When there was a fight for the throne, it's like, all right, out of the people fighting for it, who's going to do the most for me? And there was always, will this king let my daughter marry his son so that then my, lineage can hopefully get into the crown as well. Everyone was just looking for, something to gain, or someone to protect what they'd already been given. It's all very political. And this sort of shit is happening in France big time in the early 14th century. King Charles IV had died in 1328, and like a total fucking asshole, he had the nerve to die not having produced an heir, even though he had lived until the ancient medieval age of 33 years old. What a dick. What a selfish dick. And his death set off a series of battles between those who thought the throne rightfully belonged to them. Initially, Charles was succeeded in Navarre, now part of Spain, even though they'd be their own separate Basque nation by his niece Joan II, and he was succeeded in France proper by his cousin Philip of Valois, who would become King Philip VI. That's right, he had two kingdoms under one throne. He dies, and now they go back to being two separate kingdoms. That shit went on all the time, that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, a man in England named King Edward III took full control of the English throne in 1330, following a brief hiccup in lineal rule over there. And initially, he was cool with King Philip VI being the new king of France. He was content to let Phil do his thing. He's going to let Phil be Phil, and then he's going to be Ed doing Ed shit across the channel. But then Philip pissed Ed off. Philip took back some land within France that had belonged to Edward's predecessor, his father, King Edward II, and Eddie III, he didn't care for that. It was so like Philip to start taking people's shit. Classic Phil. That's Phil being Phil. That's a quintessential Phil power move. So because Edward didn't like what Phil the Pill, there we go, it's up to, he suddenly remembered that he actually had a claim to the French throne himself. He totally forgotten about that. He was like, what we need to find is another claim to the throne. Someone who will work with us. Someone like me. Wait. Not someone like me. Someone exactly like me. Someone who is me. What we need is me. I will be the claim to the throne. I've got to be related to that bastard somehow. We're all related, aren't we? My eyes did not end up this close together due to my parents not fucking their cousins. Hurry. Someone who isn't the product of multi-generational incense. Please, decipher my family tree. Supply me with favorable fortune. So in 1337, Edward elected to assert his claim to the French crown as the only living male descendant of his deceased maternal grandfather, Philip IV. But then invoking Salic law, which banned succession along female lines, the French flatly rejected Edward's claim to the throne, and shit was on. Let's get it on. In this corner, we have King Edward the hopeful. In this other corner, King Charles the scared. Let's get it on. And yeah, it was a wrestling match. Now, initially, England had a strong advantage in its battles against the English, and this advantage was known as the English longbow. I love medieval warfare kind of history. It allowed the English to pick apart the French from afar. So these longbows, these bad boys were about 6.5 feet tall, and it was rumored that they could rain down arrows from over 300 yards out. And their big, heavy arrows dropping from the sky would cut right through chainmail, cut right through armor. And the British were very proficient with these longbows in the 14th century, and the French were not. So heavy advantage, England. In the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the longbow led to the English under King Edward losing less than 300 men, while the French forces fighting under King Philip lost 13 to 14,000 men. Damn, man. The French had roughly 50 times as many casualties in that battle, which they lost, of course. England under King Eddie probably would have went on to just claim all of France for Britain, just foobar the rest of their military with that longbow, had it not been for the Black Death. There's so many twists and turns in these stories, right? Black Death needs to be a future suck. So the English, they're kicking the shit out of the French early on, with their longbows, and then the plague hits Britain in the mid-14th century. Hits them hard enough to stop their war effort. In 1348, the bubonic plague struck England and killed nearly a third of the nation's entire population. That's a lot. Just fucking everybody is either sick or dying, sick and dying, or tending to the sick and dying. It was just hell on earth. All military operations are halted for nearly a decade as they shift focus to, I'm guessing, mostly burial. A lot of funerals, a lot of black fabric being made. Coffin makers making some serious coin, getting rich on that coffin money. Great days for the coffin trade. Strong times for funeral homes, but all military progress for the English is lost. Meanwhile, over in France, King Philip dies. Phil just being Phil. He starts some shit and then he dies. That's so Phil. He dies in 1350. And his son, John II, takes the throne, but then is captured by the British in 1356. John's son, Charles, gives England a bunch of territories and a lot of money to free his father in 1360, signs the Treaty of Brittany with King Edward, renouncing his claim to the French throne in exchange for full sovereignty over his captured lands in France. Advantage England once again. But then King John II of France dies in 1364, and his son Charles, now Charles V, decides, on second thought, I didn't want to sign that treaty. He thinks, now that I think about it, I fucking hate that treaty. Instead of honoring it, how about the English? How about you guys go fuck yourselves? And he goes back on the treaty and he wages war on England once again. And basically it just keeps going on like this. Constant fighting, back and forth for over 100 years between Britain and France. The war would last until 1453 when King Charles VII of France, the man Joan helped greatly in the battle against the English, finally kicked the English out of France for good. And then the English would quickly redirect their ass-kicking energy towards the New World across the Atlantic. Quick note, technically, for you historiophiles who really know this stuff, technically not all of the English left France, like 99.9%. They would retain the small port city of Calais, closest city to England in mainland France there, until relinquishing even that city in 1558. So, I guess France just felt it wasn't worth the trouble to sack back in 1453. So now we've set up the backstory for Joan of Arc's fight for French independence from England. You're not going to be graded on this again. I know it's a lot of names bouncing around, but I just wanted to establish, that for many years prior to Joan's birth, there was just a lot of fighting between France and England, and then the fighting revolved around claims to the throne. And they're making treaties, they're doing this, they're doing that. They're like, okay, you can have this land if you leave us alone here. And then the next guy comes along, nope, get the fuck out of there. Now we don't want to believe that. And then that guy dies, and another guy, and the other side's like, actually, I should be the king now. And, it just keeps going and keeps going. Okay, so we basically already had a little Timesuck timeline, but now let's officially jump into one. Let's jump into the timeline of the life of Joan of Arc.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
January 6th, 1412, Joan Alexander Robert Bobbert von Twinkletoes Arc is born in Domremy, about 150 miles east of Paris. And of course, I made up those middle names. Her name was Joan d'Arc. Her little village had less than 200 people in it. And I'm guessing 0 cool clubs, probably not a public pool, no movie theaters, no arcades. So, it fucking sucked. No thanks. France had been involved in that damn 100-year war we were talking about for about 75 years already, the time of her birth. Her parents, because again, it's that misnomer. It actually lasted for longer than 100 years. Her parents were Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romée. And for small-town peasant folk, they did well for themselves. Joan's father owned 40 acres over which he rotated his crops, pastured his sheep, and another 10 acres in the Bois Chenou. It is documented that Jacques and Isabelle were good Christians, good farmers, nice people. They lived in the only house in the village that was built of stone, not wood and thatch, which I think is pretty cool. And the family home, very cool, is still standing today. It's listed as a historic monument as of 1840. Joan of Arc's birthplace has been preserved, restored. On the front is a carved little, it's like a how do you say it? Tympanum. I think a tympanum. It's not a very rarely used word. It's like a little recessed cutout in a wall where you can put like a little statue. And there's a little thing of burying it. It's like a 15th century coat of arms, little statue of Joan in there, kneeling in her suit of armor. Inside, visitors see 4 rooms: the bedroom which she was born, her bedroom, the cellar, her brother's bedroom. The town had been renamed Domremy La Pucelle after Joan's nickname, La Pucelle de Orleans, the Virgin of Orleans. Orleans. Joan had 4 siblings: Jacquemin, Jean, Catherine, and Pierre. Jean and Pierre would later follow their little sister into battle, while Jacquemin stayed to help his parents with the farm. So typical of Jacquemin. Of course, Jacquemin would stay behind. But Jean, I have to help Mom and Paul with the farm. They'll be fine, Jacquemin. No, they won't, John. They need me. They said you actually slow them down, Jacquemin. But who will pick the carrots, John? Who? You know I pick the best carrots. I always have. Yes, Father will handle the radishes, and the turnips, and the green onions, and Mother will harvest the cabbage and the spinach. But who will pick the carrots, John? Who picks the carrots if not Jacquemin? Jesus Christ, fine, stay home and pick the carrots, Jacquemin. So you could have said you were afraid to fight. You didn't need to get so weird about the carrots. No one picks the carrots like Jacquemin, Jean. I think that was somewhere between Spanish and French. I tried to get into it by selling with my arms. You can't see it, but I was fucking going, pumping my arms, really getting into those voices. Joan had a pretty typical childhood. She spent it under her mother's tutelage. She learned the domestic skills expected of a woman. An apprenticeship began as soon as the girl was able to fetch and carry. When later asked if she had learned any craft in her youth, Joan said that she had indeed, boasting that in sewing and spinning I fear no woman. As to the importance of those and all other womanly duties, she would also later add there were enough other women to do them. So she wasn't interested in doing the womanly things. She was good, but she didn't care about it. Summer of 1495, when Joan was 13, she received what she described as a voice from God to help and guide me. The voice came at midday when Joan was in her father's garden, adjacent to the parish cemetery. The voice came from over her right shoulder, was accompanied by a green light, saying, "Joan of Arc, you have the ability to overcome great fear. Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps." Bet you didn't know Joan of Arc was once the Green Lantern, did you? Probably because it's not true. Would have been nice. Would have helped her not get burnt if she could have used her, Green Lantern power ring to form like a big green fire extinguisher, put her fire out. Maybe a big green fucking hammer to smash her persecutors. And if this was going to happen to a 13-year-old kid, it was going to happen to one like Joan. She was a deeply religious child who would go down on her knees every time she heard the church bell tolled, is one quote. Often slipped away to speak with God before this happened. And then the Count of Dunois, who would become one of Joan's closest comrades in arms, remarked that even at the frantic height of her military career, it was her habit every day at vesper time or at dusk to retire into a church and have the bells rung for almost half an hour. Watching her pray, Dunois saw a woman seized with a marvelous rapture. So she was very, very, very religious. She was one of those one of the many words that gives me a lot of trouble. She was pious, not pious, as I believe I've said in the past occasionally. Joan would later say that the voice she heard that day was Saint Michael, who, while sometimes referred to as a saint, is not a saint but rather an angel, an archangel. The leader of all angels and the leader of the army of God. According to Christian tradition, St. Michael has 4 main responsibilities. The first is to combat Satan. The second is to escort the faithful to heaven at their hour of death. The third is to be champion of all Christians and the church itself. And the fourth is to call men from life on earth to their heavenly judgment. So she went big. She spoke to St. Michael, top angel. She didn't waste her time speaking to some bullshit bottom shelf angel like a St. Willard. I don't know if you know about St. Willard. St. Willard is a lower level angel who also has 4 responsibilities that are not as important. Number 1, first is to combat minor, easily defeatable demons, and even then, only when no other better at fighting angels are nearby and available. The second is to monitor non-believers from a distance during inconsequential points in their existences. The third is to be a really big fan of Christians when surrounded by other more powerful angels. At other times, totally okay for St. Willard to denounce religion, to denounce Christianity when social circumstances dictate that to do otherwise may create an awkward moment. And the fourth responsibility of St. Willard is to call men from life on earth to ask them how they're doing, and then to quickly hang up if the conversation gets too heated or emotional. No, but for real, she thought she was speaking directly to the Archangel Michael. And she didn't tell anyone about her visions at the time. The voices asked simple questions about church, about being a good girl. A lot of virgin questions. I'm not making that up. A lot of questions, was she still a virgin? Was she planning on staying a virgin? Are you sure you didn't dampen Dominic's dingle behind the apothecary last Saturday night? Seriously, a lot of virgin talk. What if the voice was not an angel, but actually her brother, just Jacques Romain? Like for real. I convinced my sister Donna that I was God when I was a kid. I think it was like junior high, maybe 6th grade. Seriously, I would sneak up onto the roof when she played outside with her toys. I would watch her. I would look down on her and just gonna hide out of sight. And I would change my voice and speak as if I was God. I'd be like, Donna, be righteous in all your ways, Donna. Cherish your family, Donna, especially your brother Daniel. He is destined for greatness. I don't actually remember exactly what I said, but I do know family lore is that I had her convinced for a while that God was talking to her. That would be pretty funny if Joan joined the French war effort, like turning the tides in favor of France from which the English would never recover, all because Jacques Romain, her pervert brother, was fucking with her, asking her about her virginity and stuff. Highly doubtful, but fun to imagine. And this voice spoke to Joan for years, so it's very, very likely that, in my opinion, that blatant mental illness sent Joan into battle and turned the tides of war, which is also pretty damn amazing. What a fortunate thing. What a fortunate mental illness for her to suffer, for France in general. Like, it really helped France out a lot. By 1427, the voices in Joan's head were no longer speaking to her about her virginity. Now they kind of shifted focus. They're talking about battle. She becomes convinced that she was chosen. She was the chosen one to save France. As she said in her words, there is no one else on earth, be he king or duke or the king of Scotland's daughter or anyone else, who can restore the kingdom of France. So she was very convinced in her mission. And why would anyone entertain this peasant girl into thinking she could save France? Why would anyone even listen to her? Well, because of some prior prophecies, right? This is the age when prophecies were taken a lot more seriously than they are now. There were a number of prophecies circulating around the country at that time that claimed that a woman or a virginal woman would be the savior of France. One, long before the start of the 100 Years' War, was pre-Christian. It was attributed to the mythical Arthurian wizard Merlin, who prophesied that a marvelous maid would come from the Bois Chazou, the ancient wood, to save France. Fuck yeah, man. Finally, a wizard shows up in one of these tales. A cleric known as Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote about a legendary King Arthur in the early 12th century, and included in King Arthur's court was a wizard, Merlin. And Merlin wrote a book of prophecies that Geoffrey supposedly found, or Geoffrey. Might have been Geoffrey of Monmouth. Geoffrey. It's too many fucking... This Timesuck, I must have looked up 100 pronunciations. Fucking crazy. King Arthur, legendary British leader who, according to medieval histories and romances, led the defense of Britain against Saxon invaders in the late 5th and 6th centuries CE. Many, if not most, historians doubt a real King Arthur ever actually existed. A legend in folklore. Just a majestic king, noble knights, wizards, witches. So that's pretty cool, in a time long before the web, long before even a printing press, when the written word was scarce, when people wrote with quills and ink bottles, when no one had yet sailed across the Pacific, or at least done so and spread the word, the world was truly magical. There was no Google Earth to map the dark forests. Right? Think about how many people believe in cryptozoology now in the age of high-powered digital cameras and video recorders in every purse and pocket. Imagine what life was like before most of the world was even mapped at all. Dragons and sea serpents, the prophecies of long-dead wizards. Must have seemed so real, especially to an imaginative and passionate young girl who was deeply pious. Another common prophecy of the day, of Joan's day, was a more modern one. It was a response to a supposedly scandalous behavior that the wife of the king, Charles VI, Isabeau of Bavaria, mother of the man Joan would fight to make the king, Charles VII, the eldest son of the King of France when Joan was a child, had supposedly engaged in. The prophecies was that a virgin would save France after a fallen woman had shamed it, because Isabeau was caught supposedly having an affair, and then many questioned the paternity of her son Charles, and then, of course, questioning his legitimacy to the throne. Isabeau was one of many complicated characters during that 100 Years' War. Her husband, Charles VI, suffered from some sort of mental illness that resulted in him taking long absences and running the government. She was allowed to rule in his place. His illness created a power vacuum that would eventually lead to the Burgundians shifting their allegiance to England. It would also lead to Isabeau attending the 1420 signing of the Treaty of Troyes, which decided that the English king, Henry V, should inherit the French crown after the death of her husband, Charles VI. She lived in English-occupied Paris, until her death in 1435. And then the English, were again making military progress in the early part of the 15th century. So much back and forth, man. Fucking crazy. Think about those days, too, when, like your leader could be blatantly mentally ill, but you don't get to have a new leader. You still got to wait till they die. I mean, and I know I'm sure some of you are making some Trump jokes to yourself right now, because I try not to get political here. I'm not going to say where my feelings lie, but I know a fair amount of the country is not terribly confident in his mental faculties. But he's not he's not, in my opinion, blatantly mentally ill. Like what if somebody truly was? Like, what if a leader was obviously schizophrenic, going into a press conference and just fucking flying off the handle in a 2-hour rant, like a David Icke style rant about lizards, and everybody's like, "What the fuck?" But you can't get rid of them. You're going to have, you're stuck with that person for decades, if that's how long it takes for them to die or for somebody to kill them. What a weird time to live in. To live in northern France around Joan's time must have been terrible. It seemed like every few years, someone else is in charge of you. It reminds me of our exploration of Vlad the Impaler's Wallachia, also in the 15th century, constantly going back and forth between Christian and Muslim forces. Remember that from that suck? Main takeaway is just don't ever live in 15th century Europe. Don't do it. If you get the chance to go back there, don't do it. It's fucking terrible. On May 13th, 1428, Joan's father, Jacques, is summoned to Vaucouleurs, some 12 miles or 20 miles north of Domremy, to meet with the town's captain, Robert de Baudricourt, about the escalating tensions between the warring factions. Now, this area is roughly 300 kilometers, 186 miles east of Paris. So while the war with England was never all that far away, the area that Joan specifically lived in had been, under French control consistently. Joan was informed by her angels that she must accompany her father and, of course, not bang any bros along the way. Very concerned with her virginity was this angel. Very concerned with her virginity was Joan, as we'll find out. One misplaced dick could have ruined the whole prophecy, destroyed the entire revolution. And speaking of dick, let's check in with another one of today's sponsors. Today's Timesuck also brought to you by Mama Ridgway's Clean Ween. Clean Ween is a special soap bar with a hole in the middle, so you can put an antibacterial pine-scented polish on that pristine penis of yours. Mama Ridgway's Clean Ween soap bars really wet your whistle as you work to get that ween clean enough to slide it on through. Fuck that soap. Literally fuck it. That's how Clean Ween works. Tiny, invisible cleanliness crystals within Clean Ween break down as you push your penis back and forth, limp or hard, through the soap hole, squeezing and cleaning your ween, just like Mama Ridgway would do if she could get her actual hands on it. Order now. Get a free taint and scrot sponge to get your whole undercarriage shiny and sparkling, from butt crack to cock and balls. Head to cleanween.thisisupsetting, enter the discount code TIMESUCK, and then pray that Lucifina gives you back your sanity, because you're in a real dark place right now. You're in a real dark place if you're actually trying to order some Clean Ween. Poor new listener, you must be so confused right now. Timesuck is a weird world that just keeps getting weirder. Stay along for the ride long enough, and these strange moments will make at least a little bit of sense, I promise. Okay, May 1428, we're back. Joan's father heads a bit north to talk about the war with Captain Robert de Baudricourt. Now, a war that is possibly coming to his part of the countryside, and his daughter, Joan, accompanies him. 16-year-old Joan felt that she needed to see the Dauphin of France, the male heir to the throne. She needed to see Charles, because she strongly felt that she would be the key to winning the war for France. Before she left, she visited a hilltop shrine 2 miles north of Domremy that was consecrated to the Virgin Mary, and then Joan said that the Virgin appeared in front of me carrying a sword and a flag, but dressed in every other way like a shepherdess. And when Joan protests to the Virgin Mary that she has no abilities as a warrior, the Holy Mother tells her that a virgin without stain can accomplish all the good deeds in the world if she withstands the love that's of the world. Only look at me. I was like you, a chaste maid, yet I gave birth to the Lord divine. I myself am divine. Again, so much virgin stuff. Who knew that an intact hymen is what you need to win a war? Here I thought you had to be better at fighting, like a fool. I've believed that. What have we been doing in this country, sending our young, sex-having men into battle? It's fucking idiot. That's stupid. We need to be sending in our tweens, right? Send our tweens into battle. At least the girls. Send some virginal girls over to Afghanistan, North Korea. More hymens, less bullets. Why isn't that an extremely confusing bumper sticker? Inspired by the Mother Mary's words, Joan accompanies her father, informing him that the voices have told her that she needs to talk to Sir Robert. I'm sure he was fucking thrilled to hear that and to bring his crazy-ass daughter to the local town's captain. Sir Robert, as Joan knew, had access to the Dauphin. According to her voices, he would give me men-at-arms to accompany her west from the little pocket of resistance represented by the area. Joan explains her commands. I don't know what she meant by that. That's just the quote. He would give me men-at-arms to accompany her west from the little pocket of resistance represented. Joan explains her commands to Sir Robert, and it doesn't go as well as she had hoped. Instead of something along the lines of voices have been telling you, a young girl with zero military training, that I should let you lead actual soldiers into battle against England? Sounds good. How many do you need? Would you like to have my horse as well? Maybe borrow my sword? Anything you need? No, he didn't do that. He had a good laugh at her expense, and he tells her dad that she needs a good slapping because he was, probably more sane than she was. And then in December of 1428, Joan's aunt gets pregnant, so, no fighting for her non-hymen having ass. And then Joan heads to Vaucouleurs with the excuse that she needs to help her aunt. Yolande of Aragon, the Dauphin's mother-in-law, hears that there is a 17-year-old girl in Vaucouleurs claiming to be sent by God to guide Charles to the throne, and instead of laughing it off, she likes it. She was a superstitious woman, and, she had been hearing about those prophecies. And she knew that France needed a morale boost to help win this 100 Years' War. So she dispatches her messenger from the court at Chinon to that of her son and René, the future Duke of Bar and Lorraine, and Baudricourt's immediate overlord. Sir Robert, the town's captain, who had been laughing off Joan's visions of grandeur, Yolande wrote to René, was on no account to squash or banish this peasant girl. Not when his country needed the energy and confidence inspired by a prophecy fulfilled. So smart lady. I feel like she recognizes that, maybe Joan is batshit crazy, but still going to be a good morale boost for the French side. So Sir Robert is instructed to have the girl evaluated and her words to be taken seriously. Joan shows up in Vaucouleurs wearing a rough homespun dress that she knew wasn't right for fighting, and then she was given her first set of men's clothing. And she would never go back to willingly wearing women's clothing again. She would not go back to wearing a woman's outfit. And according to historical sources, not only did she wear men's clothing all of a sudden, she got really into men's fashion. She became known as a fop or a dandy, someone very into men's fashion. This one excerpt from a historical excerpt says, the tailor-made clothes the citizens of Vaucouleurs gave her awoke a taste for the luxurious fabrics and flamboyant styles normally held out of a peasant's reach. Velvet surcoats embroidered with gold thread, fur-lined mantles, colorful tunics bearing coats of arms, tight-fitting damask doublets with jeweled buttons and slashed sleeves that revealed contrasting silk linings, brightly colored hose, voluminous gowns with sleeves that hung to the ground, pegasses with their extravagantly long and pointed toes, belts hung with bells and trinkets, an infinity of hats, all kinds of shit. So why did she get into dressing like a man? Well, she would claim later that God told her to. Now, is that the truth? We have no reason to believe that she didn't believe that. However, a lot of historians, authors, scholars, others have speculated that she may have been lesbian, perhaps a transvestite, perhaps transgender, etc. Most believe that she dressed as she did because she thought God told her to dress that way. She's hearing these voices telling her to do stuff, these various agents of God telling her to fight for France, be a virgin, put on some fucking pants, take off your dress, that kind of stuff. Around this time, Joan also cuts off her long hair, cuts her hair short. She took this idea from St. Margaret, a 13th century Italian woman, recently made a saint who had cut her hair off to make herself less sexually desirable and less prone to sin. Again, going back to chastity, guys, big thing. Big thing. Apparently keeping your legs closed as a woman was just the most important thing you could do. The haircut also showed a status change, telling potential suitors she was no longer a girl available for marriage. Long hair, uncovered hair was a sign that a girl was available to be wed. So maybe she dressed up like a man also partly to guard her virginity that she held so precious. Right? She's doing everything she can to send that message of do not fuck me. In February of 1429, Joan meets with the Duke of Lorraine, who will help with her journey to meet the Dauphin. She's finally going to meet Charles. He gives her a horse, 4 francs, and another ally. Training into how to become a soldier. To master a knight's necessary skills, ordinarily acquired over years, Joan is trained for 4 weeks at Vaucouleurs, and then will be granted an additional 3 at Poitiers, when not being interrogated by the clerics assembled there to assess her claim of divine vocation. She learned to ride a war horse. I guess she learned to ride it faster than anyone believed was possible. So she did have some skills, She wasn't just cray-cray. She had some real skills. February 22nd, 1429, she at last sets out for Chinon with 6 men. The traveling party of 7 included the 2 knights who financed her trip, Jean de Metz, Bertrand de Poligny, Bertrand's servant, Julien, Yolande's messenger, Collet de Vienne, Richard the Archer. There's a fucking name I can say. Richard the Archer. Fucking nailed it. Dick the Bowslinger. Dick the Arrow Slinger. And the servant he shared with Vienne, Jean de Honnecourt. They were all knights and servants of Sir Robert de Baudricourt, Joan testified. Sir Robert, the man who first laughed at Joan's visions, now sworn to protect her on her journey. On February 21st, the 7 travelers paused at the village of St. Catherine de Fourbois, a day's ride from Chinon. They had made it that far without incident, and I guess that was a miracle on its own. And Joan kept herself busy dictating letters to the king-to-be, saying, I sent letters to my king telling him I had traveled a good 150 leagues to come to his aid, and I told him also that I knew many things to his advantage. His court was divided on whether or not to receive Joan. She did get a response back in 2 days. Oh, she did not get a response back it took her 2 days to get one. There we go. And by the way, I said she dictated letters because she was illiterate, but she was very well spoken, as you can tell by what she had said in the letters. So she's, not educated, but very intelligent. March 4th, 1429, Joan reaches Chinon in the middle of the day, and then says, but when Jean de Metz and Bertrand de Poligny were admitted to the Dauphin's chambers upstairs, they discovered that Charles wasn't expecting the arrival of the maid from Lorraine. La Tremoille had intercepted the letters and destroyed them. So somebody in his court got the letters she'd been sending, fucking tossed them out. March 6th, the scene in which Joan at last meets the Dauphin claims a prominent role in every telling of Joan's story, identifying her immediate discovery of the Dauphin, who had hidden himself among a crowd of courtiers, as her first significant miracle, the one that ignited the fuse of her messianic trajectory. After all, she'd never seen him before, never seen his likeness. What other than the voices in her head could have tipped her off? She walks right over to Charles, drops on her knees, and says, Most noble Lord Dauphin, I have come and am sent by God to bring help to you and your kingdom. Charles is impressed, takes Joan into a private chat, and tells him a secret that basically, this is part of the legend too, tells him something that that nobody could have known, something only he knew, some closely guarded secret of his. This rural peasant girl knew exactly what it was. And it was not disclosed until the end of Charles' life, what Joan had said to him to convince him that she was real. And I guess Charles had made a humble, silent request in prayer to our Lord, in which he begged him devoutly that if it were true that he was, the heir to the throne of France, might it please God to protect and defend him. Otherwise, he asked God to allow him to escape to the court of one of his allies in either Spain or Scotland. And Joan knew he had made that prayer, knew it in detail, enough detail to convince the Dauphin of her legitimacy. So, how could she have known that? Pretty impressive. Again, I throw out there, I say mental illness, but, if you're of the religious bent, a lot of, the faithful believe that she was touched by God. That's the only way she could have known by that stuff, or known that kind of stuff. Still, he was slow in his actions to allow her to fight, which frustrated Joan. But he did allow her to follow her voices, listen to him. Although she had convinced Charles of her legitimacy, she was still examined by 2 women of the court, still to make sure she's a virgin. Prophecy doesn't work. If, she had been scratching that deep vaginal itch. Nope, she hadn't. Hymen is still intact, which I guess is pretty unusual due to the fact that she'd been riding a horse through rough conditions for several weeks, which is a good way to get rid of your hymen. That's actually how I lost my hymen. Rough horseback riding specifically is how I lost my penis hymen. I used to have the rare penis hymen reserved for only the most magnificent of men. It's a little tiny hymen that covers the end of your ween so that others who see it can tell that it's still clean and you're still a virgin. But alas, one rough ride and off it went, which wasn't all that bad because at the age of 16, I could finally now start peeing out the front and I didn't have to pee out of my butt again. Because that's when you do have a penis hymen, it covers your pee hole. So you can't pee. That's how clean your ween is. Now, it's not used for sex, not used for peeing. You butt pee for the first, however many years of your life until you drop that weenie hymen. Anywho, March 11th through 12th, 1429, Joan is sent to Poitiers to meet with the religious tribunal. She will be examined by still more theologians to determine her intentions before she is allowed to proceed. Elaine Chartier, a political commentator as well as a poet, stressed Joan's unusual intellectual capacities. She appeared to have studied at a university rather than cared for sheep in the fields based on her intellect. And they're very impressed. On March 27th, 1429, Joan is officially presented to the wider court. And I guess no princess in all of Europe had ever made such a memorable debut. The Count of Vendôme, one of Yolande's retinue, escorted Joan into the Grand Salle on the upper floor of fucking some other crazy fucking bunch of French words. I'm so sick of these fucking French words. It's like she had to have gone to every fucking French village in all of goddamn France. And it's like, fuck these words. Once the staring, hushed crowd had parted enough to allow Joan and the Count to make their way to the throne, the Count presented to her a man seated on the throne who was not Charles. They're trying to trick her again, even after she knew his secret. They're still on the fence, I guess. They want to put her through more tests. Before Joan's entrance, Charles had explained the ruse to all present. It was a means of testing the counsel of Joan's voices. He would change clothes with one of his courtiers who would take Charles' place on the dais while the Dauphin hid amongst the crowd. Joan was not fooled for a moment by the imposter. She wasn't walking over to fake Charles. She went over to found the real Charles immediately, recognized him perfectly. And I guess Yolande was pleased with how well the court took to Joan finding Charles. I got to say, man, if all these historical accounts are true, and I have no reason to doubt them, I too would have gotten caught up by her divine inspiration, right? They're trying to trick her at every turn. They're making her meet with all these theological courts, and she just keeps amazing everyone. And this next parlor trick is especially impressive. April 6th, 1429, a week after her presentation to the court at Chinon, Joan arrives in Tours, about 5 miles northwest of Chinon, equipped for battle, armed as quickly as possible. Her armor did not have much decoration, but was, incredible quality. I guess it was pretty expensive. A little display of angels adorned her battle standard, that little battle flag she would wave to rally the troops behind her. And while in Tours, Joan sent word that she needed a sword. This is the little parlor trick I was talking about. Said that she needed a sword that was in the church of St. Catherine de Fourbois, behind the altar. She'd known its location. She told the examiner, not because she discovered it herself during the hours she spent in the church, but because she had learned of it through her voices, months after she had left St. Catherine de Fourbois. And immediately was found rusted all over. It was in the ground, like buried in the ground, rusted over. Upon it were 5 crosses, and that sword was cleaned up and presented to Joan. How about that shit? I mean, I guess she could have heard, or overheard someone talking about it, but still impressive. And if people were talking about it, why wouldn't they have just digged it up? Pretty impressive that she knew that some old sword was buried there. Joan would end up having 5 swords, but never actually used one in battle. She led the troops in charges, guided assaults, strategically, but never actually ran her sword through the enemy. There's only one record of her using a sword. Jean, Duke of Alençon, watched her once chase a girl, this is a quote, chase a girl who was with the soldiers so hard with her sword drawn that she broke her sword over the prostitute's back. A significant blow, as a battle sword typical of its time was a large weapon intended to be used with both hands and weighing as much as 10 pounds. That's a historical quote, not from Jean. Man, she was really into chastity, right? Didn't even like when other people were having too much sex. She was clearly not being guided or watched over by Lucifina. Lucifina would not be into Joan's rigid sexual attitude. On April 21st, 1429, Joan and her army set out for Blois. I believe, Blois is how you say it, 30 miles to the northeast. When Joan arrives, she has Pasquerel send a letter to the English armies. Joan was never formally taught to read or to write, but she could clearly, again, dictate the fuck out of a letter. Here's a letter she sent to the English armies before her first battle against them. She was not messing around. She said, King of England, and you, Duke of Bedford, who you call yourself regent of the kingdom of France, you, William Pole, Count of Suffolk, John Talbot, and you, Thomas Lord Scales, who call yourselves lieutenants of the said Duke of Bedford, make satisfaction to the King of Heaven. Surrender to the maid who is sent here by God, the King of Heaven, the keys of all the good towns which you have taken and violated in France. She has come here by God's will to reclaim the blood royal. She is very ready to make peace if you are willing to grant her satisfaction by abandoning France and paying for what you have held. And you, archers, men at war, gentlemen and others, who are before the town of Orleans, go away in your own country in God's name. And if you do not do so, expect tidings from the maid, who will come to see you shortly to your very great harm. King of England, if you do not do so, I am a chieftain of war, and in whatever place I meet your people in France, I shall make them leave, and in whether they will it or not, and if they will not obey, I will have them all put to death. I am sent here by God. She wants to remind him that. The King of Heaven, body for body, to drive you out of all of France. And if they wish to obey, I will show them mercy. And be not of another opinion, for you will not hold the kingdom of France from God, the King of Heaven. Oh, Jesus Christ, man, she's fucking wordy. I'm not going to read any more of her letter. It's fucking enough. I get it, Joan. All right, we fucking heard you the first 10 fucking times you talked about being sent here by God. She even ends the letter. God's anointed, his Messiah, La Pucelle. Okay, so basically, she sends him a little get the fuck out or get killed warning. They were real wordy back then, weren't they? Right? Man, it's just, and I am Joan of Orleans, sent here by God, holy of holiest, angel of the angels, Lord in heaven. Just shut the fuck up and get to the point already, Joan. What are you getting paid by the word? It's a fucking letter. Just send him a note. Just saying something like, hey, guys, fucking get out of our country or I'm going to cut your fucking heads off. All right? You don't have to write 3 goddamn books to get that point across. You're going to face the wrath of Joan's Warhymen. April 29th, 1429. Joan, wordied lady, arrives in Orleans. I'm going to say Orleans from now on. I was trying to say it in the French way earlier. Fuck that. It's Orleans to me. A city that had been under siege by the English since October of 1428. Joan had approached Orleans under the assumption that she was Orleans. There we go. I'm going to say Orleans. All right? I'll settle on that. Leading an army intended to drive off the English, but really she was actually sent by Charles as kind of a cheerleader to boost morale of the French inhabitants in hopes of inspiring them to revolt. She didn't know that. Charles wanted to test how the people responded to her, before he really put her in charge of actual military action. I guess she was pissed off about being misled. She would say, "You thought you had deceived me." She said this to one of the captains who kind of sidelined her and wouldn't allow her to really lead troops initially. "But it is you who have deceived yourselves, for I am bringing you better help than ever you got from any soldier or any city." Man, she didn't lack confidence. Did not lack confidence. And this is a teenager. Can you imagine what somebody must have thought of her initially? This is what? She's like 16 at this time? 16, maybe 17? And these are all grown, battle-hardened men. And she's like, "Never before has a soldier such as I been sent here to guide France. No one is as powerful as Joan. My hymen alone could take out 20,000 British soldiers." So anyway, same day, a French sortie distracts the English troops on the west side of Orleans, and Joan enters the city unopposed by its eastern gate. She brings in needed supplies, reinforcements, and she does inspire the French, man. They do rally around her to form a passionate resistance against the English. And on Tuesday, May 3rd, the people of Orleans, held a formal citywide procession in her honor, presented money and gifts to the maid and her companions, asked them to deliver their town from its siege. Now Joan's captains, seeing the effect she does have on the town's morale, now they allow her to fight for real, and she does personally lead the charge in several battles. And on May 7th, is actually struck by an arrow, which she quickly dresses her wound, returns to the fight, and the French do win the day. And then the following day, on May 8th, the English retreat from Orleans, and the siege is lifted. And during the siege, 140 Englishmen have been killed in a few days of fighting, another 40 taken prisoner. only a handful of French lives were lost. This was a major victory for the French, man. The city had held strategic and symbolic significance to both sides during this conflict. The consensus among contemporaries was that the English regent, John of Lancaster, would have succeeded in realizing Henry V's dream of conquering all of France if Orleans fell. So it does not. They push him back. Huge turning of the tides here. The Dauphin sent out a notice dated May 10th, 1429, calling upon all citizens of France to give thanks to God for the great victory at Orleans that had been accomplished by captains who, through their great prowess and courage in arms, and always by means of the grace of our Lord, captured the whole of this fortress. The victory does turn the tides of war back towards the French. Victory over the English feels more possible now. Suddenly now, men are coming out of the woodwork. They're volunteering to fight for Joan and France. On May 13th, Joan leaves for Tours, where she meets the Dauphin to get some money, get some supplies to replenish her forces. Then on June 11th and 12th, Joan and her army take Giorgio through heavy battle. This is Joan's first offensive battle and first victory that way. A town that's not being a siege being laid upon it. She's actually taking the attack to the English now. Giorgio was a small town on the southern bank of the Loire River in central France, about 10 miles east of Orleans. Orleans, conquered by the English a few years earlier as a staging point for a planned invasion of southern France. The city was defended by a wall, several towers, fortified gates. A ditch just outside of the walls further enhances the defenses. Outside of the walls, there's some suburbs, some people living out there, single fortified bridge of strategic significance during the latter part of the war is crossing the Loire River to the north bank. And the city is defended by approximately 700 troops armed with gunpowder weaponry. The battle begins with the French assault on the suburbs. English defenders leave the city walls, and the French fall back. Joan of Arc uses her standard, waving her flag, to begin a French rally. The English retreat to the city walls now. The French spend the night in the suburbs, and then the following morning, she calls upon the defenders to surrender. They refuse. The French follow with heavy artillery bombardment using primitive cannons and siege engines. One of the town's towers falls to the ground. Joan initiates an assault on the town walls that she herself, engaged in. She actually survived some asshole throwing a stone down on her as she's climbing up on a ladder to scale the wall. It actually hits her in the head. Splits in two, is the legend, against her helmet. But she keeps climbing, doesn't even knock her off the fucking ladder, and the English suffer heavy losses and abandon the town. Pretty dope. Her legend grows with this victory. Joan and her force on June 15th, her force of about 7,000, then take a bridge from the English at Mans-sur-Loire. And then on the 16th, Joan and her army moved to Beaugency, a small town of good strategic value on the northern bank of the Loire River. In central France, the English control virtually everything north of the Loire at this time, and taking this town would begin to push into the north. Sorry if I'm pronouncing Loire wrong. I probably am. I did not get a pronunciation guide for that one. Another 1,000 troops join her fight. During the first day of fighting, the English abandon the town, retreat into the castle. The French bombard the castle with artillery fire, and the English surrender. On June 18th, the French fight the English in nearby Patay to rout. The English lose over 2,000 men out of a force of about 5,000, many of them being precious longbow archers, and the French lose only about 100 men. After the battle, the French pursue a fleeing English army, inflict more damage. Huge victory for the French. The virtual destruction of the English field army, the loss of many of their principal veteran commanders has devastated the English, devastating consequences for their position in France, and from which they would never recover for the rest of this war. During the following weeks, the French, facing negligible resistance, are able to swiftly regain big swaths of territory to the south, east, and north of Paris. And they marched to the Reims, where the Dauphin was crowned King Charles VII on July 17th, which can be a little confusing because he was kind of really already the King of France. His father had died in 1422, but his father had willed France to the English, kind of. Remember, he was mentally ill, and his wife had done that on his behalf, but then Charles didn't want to honor. They felt like this was signed during duress. Neither did some of his supporters. So really, while the English under Henry VI took over more and more of northern France, he had, prior to this, Charles had holed up in Bourges, France, and was basically king of Bourges. But now with Joan fighting for him, he feels, confident enough to declare himself, king of all of France. And he's given, more of a proper coronation. And during the coronation, Joan spoke out to the court saying, "Joan the Maid commands and informs you in the name of the King of Heaven, her rightful and sovereign lord, in whose services she is each day, that you should render true obedience and recognition to the gentle King of France. And if you do not, I promise you and certify upon your lives that we will enter with God's help all the towns that should belong to the Holy Kingdom and establish a good firm peace there, whoever comes against us. I commend you to God. May he watch over you, if it pleases him. Man, she must have been insufferable to hang around, right? I feel like she just give all these long-winded speeches all the time. Hey, John, do you want to go grab a sandwich? If God commands me to have a sandwich, then I will have a sandwich. If it is for the greater glory of France. Shut the fuck up. I just want to know if you want to grab some lunch. I, as the virginal maid of Orleans, if God wills it, will put a sandwich in one of my holes, but not that one, for that is for God alone. Okay. All right. We just wanted to know if you wanted to eat. We get it. You're a virgin. God likes you. Fucking calm down. So everything's going good, right? For Joan? Kind of. She's becoming popular with the people of France, very popular. She's seen as having won him the crown, for Charles, which is, true, but not entirely true. A lot of historians feel like, had she not been surrounded by seasoned military commanders, she would have gotten her ass kicked. I mean, she did do some really cool things. I'm not trying to say that she didn't. But remember also, she's a teenage peasant girl. She wasn't, just out of nowhere with no one's help. She was a little too aggressive from what I understand looking back, where it's like if she would have been allowed to just run things the exact way she wanted, she would have basically gotten them all killed. However, if she had not been there, the captains would have been much less aggressive, and they probably wouldn't have won these battles without her. So, they each needed the other to get these things. It was a group effort to win these battles. But the public doesn't really see it that way. They see her alone as this savior of France. And the royal court doesn't care for that. They're nervous regarding how well she's received, versus Charles. They don't like a common maid, having more military success than the Dauphin in the official French army. They don't like how much the common people love her. And this, I'm just pointing this out because later when she's captured, probably why he was reluctant to help save her. On July 17th, Joan sends another letter, this time to the Duke of Burgundy, who is still aligned with the English crown, begging him not to fight his countrymen, and also telling him essentially that he better get his shit together and join the cause, or, off with his fucking head. You're with us or you're against us, Duke of Burgundy. This is her letter she had dictated. Great and formidable prince, Duke of Ron Burgundy. I know you're kind of a big deal around here. No, but seriously, she says, Joan the Virgin requests of you, and then see, fuck, she can't get a single sentence out without referencing either God or her virginity. Joan the Virgin requests of you, in the name of the King of Heaven, my rightful and sovereign Lord, that the King of France and yourself should make a good, firm, lasting peace. Oh man, thinking about like this virgin stuff. I mean, what a terrible way to assign value to a human being. I think that's why it bothers me, because historically, it was just. It wasn't about what good things you did as a woman. It was about have you been fucked or not? Your life was reduced to such a simple equation. And if the math worked out, then you were good. And if the math didn't work out, you were just worthless. Just how much it would have sucked to be a woman back then. Just, if that was how things, worked today. Just, I founded a humanitarian organization that provides clean water and vaccines to children who would otherwise die avoidable and agonizing death. Yes, that's fine, and that's fine. But have your loins been pierced by the meat of a man? I don't know that's any of your business. But what I do know is that I donate my time regularly to local animal shelters. I also gave some of my bone marrow to someone who would have died. They would have died had I not been a bone marrow, transplant. Marrow, yes, that's fine. How many dicks have you placed upon thy tongue? Careful with this question, maiden. Any number other than 0 places one's soul in jeopardy and one's body in the rack. Are you for real? Last year I put my career on hold to care personally for my dying mother. I've always been quiet at the movie theater. I don't leave my phone on. I share the sidewalk. I understand how to merge onto the freeway. It's my responsibility to adjust my speed to the flow of traffic and yield to cars already on the freeway instead of just ramshotting my way. What have you allowed in your pooper? Penis or pinky or both? Answer me, wench. It's fucking crazy, right? Can you imagine? That's all that matters to people. Yeah. You've done some battle stuff, but what about your hymen? Because that's her nickname wasn't like Joan the Brave, wasn't Joan the Fearless, not Joan the Loyal, not Joan the Badass. Not Joan the Savior or Patriot. No, Joan the Virgin. That's her best quality because, that threatens men the least. That she was a land unconquered by foreign dick. No threat to even the frailest of egos. All right. And she continues with her letter, and I'll read a few sentences, but it's too much. She goes, fully pardon each other willingly, as faithful Christians should do. And if it should please you to make war, then go against the Saxons. Prince of Burgundy, I pray, beg, and request, as humbly as I can, that you wage war no longer in the Holy Kingdom of France, and order your people who are in any towns and fortresses of the Holy Kingdom to withdraw promptly and without delay. And as for the noble King of France, he is ready to make peace with you, saving his honor if you're not opposed. And I tell you in the name of the King of Heaven. All right, so you get it, right? She tells him that, if he doesn't back down, that, God's going to be angry, her hymen's going to be mad, and he's going to die. And August 7th, he doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit about her letter. August 7th, the Duke of Burgundy and the Duke of Bedford both claim that Charles' anointing is invalid. They don't care about Jones's letter. The Duke of Burgundy actually issues a challenge to Charles to meet him on the field of battle personally. And Charles does not accept. He wasn't a fucking brave man, really, doesn't seem like. I feel like, he was very lucky to have Joan fight for him. He instead, on August 28th, Charles signs a 4-month treaty with the Duke of Burgundy to try and push pause on the fighting. Let's talk about it for a bit. Let's hold up. He doesn't tell Joan that, which is unfortunate. Joan is 7 miles north of Paris, waiting to attack the English-controlled city. She gets bored waiting to hear from him. She doesn't hear about the treaty, and she attacks the city with 3,000 to 4,000 of her men, and spends about 2 weeks in little skirmishes around the walls of the fortified city. She doesn't really accomplish much. And then on September 8th, Charles finally gives the go-ahead to fully attack Paris. So, the treaty doesn't really hold, and it doesn't work. And Joan takes a crossbolt to her thigh. She's badly wounded. She fails to take the city, and now people start to doubt her. Fucking one loss. And people doubt her connection to God. Man, a lot of fair weather fans. When the going was good, they were hopping on the bandwagon. And now, you can't get Paris. They're like, nah, I don't know. Maybe she's not. Maybe she's just crazy. Maybe God's not talking to her. She has to go recover from that crossbow bolt wound. And then when she does, November 4th to the 8th, Charles sends her to besiege Saint-Pierre-le-Moutier. More of a village than a town, but an expertly fortified village. That it's not going to just buckle to anybody, and but it is easier to take than Paris. And really, the historians feel like this might have been done as like a confidence builder. Like get another win under your belt, kind of like a boxer. You get your ass kicked in a championship fight. All right, let's find somebody who's just notch above a basic sparring partner. Get in the ring with you. Get another W. Get you thinking right. Then we'll work to getting back to the title. November 24th to December 24th. A few weeks, after that initial little victory, she has another loss. She fails to take the town of La Charite. However, a day after abandoning the siege of that heavily fortified village, she gets right back on the battle horse, heads to Giorgio on Christmas Day, and receives letters from Charles conferring nobility upon her and her family. So she didn't get the win, but she does get a thanks for the multiple and striking benefits of divine grandeur that have been accorded us through the agency of the maid. A letter that says that, and in consideration of the praiseworthy, graceful, and useful services already rendered by the aforesaid, her family gets a raise in status, and she actually gets her town tax-exempt status that lasted for a long time after her death, even. So she gets some awards for what she's done so far, and then a few months later, on March 29th, she attacks the town of Lagny-sur-Marne. She's only leading 500 men at this point. She spends 3 weeks there, and she does take the city. So she does get another win. And then, according to legend, she performs a miracle. In April, Joan, according to witnesses, raises a child from the dead. Here is her talking about it later at her trial. How old was this infant? Some examiner asked her. 3 days old. They told me 3 days had passed with no sign of life in the child, which was as black as my coat of mail. And then she was in church, kneeling before an image of the Virgin, when the boy's mother and sisters came to her with this little baby's corpse. She prays with them, and then she testified that at last life appeared in the child. The child yawned thrice, was baptized, and then immediately died, and was buried in consecrated ground. But, when the child yawned the 3 times, the color began to return. And the guy said, was it said in the town that the resuscitation was due to your prayers? She said, I did not inquire about it. Although she knew better than any that the incident had been trumpeted as a miracle. I got to be honest, man. When I was reading about her, I was hoping to find a better miracle story than that. Better miracle story than 3 yawns by a baby who then just quickly died, after being baptized. I mean, if you're going to work a miracle, fucking make it cool. Like, bring the kid back to life, and I don't know, keep him alive longer than a few seconds or a few minutes. Let him grow up to become a cool knight or something, or work the fields with his family or be the town drunk. Something, anything better than just yawning 3 times. The month following the miracle of the 3 yawns was going to be a real bummer for Joan. Her ass-kicking ways come to an end. She'd fight her last battle, May of 1430. Joan is in the town of Campagny. A reception is held in her honor because she promised to defend the town from a Burgundian siege. And then that Duke of Burgundy, that dude who didn't care for her letter, he's amassed a sizable army. He's going to siege this town on behalf of the English crown. He demands her to, head over Campagny. She doesn't. Joan of Arc plans to surprise the Burgundian assault with the assistance of Campagny's governor, Guillaume de Flavey, on something like that, on May 19th, attacking an outpost near neighboring Margine. While it was separated from the main force, Count of John of Luxembourg sees Joan and her men by chance. So she's going out to this little attack some people separated from the main herd. Some other dude sees her, gets reinforcements. Those people chase Joan back to the city. And she rides in the very extreme rear of her forces. It's like in a position of honor. If anyone's going to be captured, it's going to be her. Man, leaders fought very differently back then. They put themselves in, perilous situations all the time. And then before the French defenders could return to Campagny, the governor closes the city gate. And so it leaves Joan and the rear guard with her trapped outside the city walls to await either death or capture. Joan and the men outside the wall surrender, and then a Burgundian soldier grabs the edge of her cloth of gold doublet, throws her off her horse, throws her onto the ground, and that's it for Joan's military career. She is now captured by the Burgundians. She's taken prisoner by the Duke of Burgundy, who then hands Joan over on January 3rd, 1431, to Pierre Cachon, a bishop of Beauvais, who would try her for heresy, right? And witchcraft by tribunal, which had been selected by Pierre Cachon himself and consisted of 10 Burgundian theologians, 22 canons of Rouen, and a bunch of monks from some other orders. And then in October of 1430, Joan decides she doesn't want to wait for this trial, and she tries to escape. She throws herself out of a tower window, and I guess there was nothing that could have broken her fall. Not a tree limb, not a little hill of grass, not a cushion of undergrowth, nothing. She throws herself out of the tower. She lands in the castle's dry moat and doesn't die. And this escape attempt would actually be used against her later at her trial because they tried to make it seem like she tried to commit suicide, which, obviously a big sin. They would ask her later, "Did you expect to kill yourself when you leaped?" She says, "No, because I leaped. I commended myself to God and Our Lady." Okay? "Hadn't your voices forbidden you to jump? I begged their pardon afterward. I admitted I was wrong in jumping, and my angels forgave me." She was clearly mentally ill. "They saw my need, and that I could in no way hold myself back, and they lent aid to my life and prevented me from being killed. Did you receive any great penance? A large part of my penance was that I hurt myself falling." That's very funny. Did you receive any punishment? I fucking landed in the moat and it hurt, you dumbass. That's my punishment, was not having an angel catch me and just guide me to safe land and let me run off. The hurt Joan did herself was significant enough that she didn't know where she was when she regained consciousness. Her Burgundian captors had to tell her. And then I guess she almost died. The physician thought she broke her back. And then the trial really gets going. And man, what a trial it would be. Reminds me of the Salem witch trials we sucked on way back, arguing about things no one can prove, like whether or not angels are real. Did angels forgive Joan from jumping from a window? In advance of her trial, November 9th and 11th, she's taken to Rouen, in an iron cage, because that's where the trial is going to be headed. She's transported there in an iron cage. She's held in a standing position for a couple days, secured by the neck, hands, and feet. That had to have sucked. And December 23rd, 1430, she arrives in Rouen, I guess is how you say it, the capital of Normandy. A cell at Rouen is where Joan was held for the last 5 months of her life, where she would always wear leg irons, where she'd lay chained by the legs with 2 pairs of irons tightly secured by another chain, which passed through the legs of her bed. That chain was attached to a great block of wood, 5 or 6 feet long. It's all locked up. Night and day, she's left in the care of 5 guards of, quote, the lowest sort, common torturers. If she had to go to the bathroom, a guard would unlock and accompany her to a closet-sized room with a little hole in the floor. She'd just fucking take a shit directly into the moat. Typically, the atmosphere that filled such privies was so saturated with ammonia gas that these places came to be called cloakrooms, where guests could expect their coats to be hung, believing the caustic smell strong enough to kill vermin. That's hilarious to me. So, like, they're having people over at the castle, and they would hang their coats up in the shit house because it stunk so bad they thought the stink would kill any, like, little parasites and stuff in their coats. Oh, my God. Once again, Joan's virginity is checked. Of course it was. To check it this time, she's stripped nude. There's a huge thing that went on sometimes at Inquisitions. 20 of the priests assigned to her trial would each take a thick blade of field grass. And when her legs are spread wide, held there with a stock-type device, each priest would shove the little grass blade into her vagina exactly 10 times and check it after each time. If there's any blood on the grass, then she's not a virgin. After all of that, her hymen is checked by a doctor who would put a small ball of cheesecloth wrapped in twine, no bigger than the size of a small apple, into her vagina. It would be left there for 2 full days. Then Joan would have to jump in place for an hour, and then if the cheesecloth fell out, then her vagina is too loose and she's not a virgin. And if it falls out, if it doesn't fall out, the cloth is taken out, and each of the priests would smell it, and if it did smell like dick, not a virgin. If it was like on the edge, if they're not sure if it smelled like dick or not, they would toss it into a stew pot, and they would cook it into a broth, and if the broth tasted like dick, not a virgin. But if they were still kind of on the edge of like, I think it tastes like dick, I'm not sure, then the priests would take turns for a full day sucking each other's dicks to remind themselves what dick tasted and smelled like. And if you still think that this is the virginity test that actually happened, God bless you. I love you so much. I love you so much if during the last 30 seconds you were like, are you fucking kidding me? What? Oh, that's horrible. No, her hymen was checked on, though. That didn't happen. All that was made up. But her hymen was checked yet again by a midwife, not a bunch of weird, strange, dick-sucking priests. Got to make sure that hymen's rock solid before sentencing her to being burned alive. So, super important. And she passes again. She must have had the most thoroughly inspected hymen in vaginal history. To prevent sexual assault and protect her important hymen, Joan wore, during her incarceration, 2 layers of hosen securely fastened to her doublet, the inner layer being waistcloth or waist-high conjoined woolen hosen attached to the doublet by full 20 cords, each cord tied into 3 eyelets apiece, for a total of 40 attachment points on the inner layer of hosen. The second layer, made of rugged leather, attached by yet another set of many cords. And then once this outfit was thus fastened together by dozens of cords connecting both layers to the doublet, it would be a substantial undertaking for anyone to get it off. Yeah. And she did all of this, even though it made, going to the bathroom extremely difficult. It was that important for her to make sure that no one, snuck a dick in there when she was sleeping or something. Very strange obsession with virginity. But, I guess I admire her conviction. And where the fuck is Charles during all of this? Where's fucking Chuck? Remember she busted her ass, to get him crowned king? And, he seems to have abandoned her once she's captured. Well, I guess historians, they don't really know why he did this for sure, because he never officially gave a reason. Probably because he was glad to see her out of his hair. Probably the court's advice. Again, remember they were worried about her popularity. Now they were kind of already winning the war. Maybe they thought they didn't need her specifically anymore to finish the rout of the English, and this was just a convenient capture. There was a bishop at the time who wrote Charles urging him to do everything in his power to help and ransom Joan of Arc from the enemy. Even said that he would be guilty of monstrous ingratitude if he didn't help, and I guess the king just ignored that bishop's letter. I get him not doing anything militarily. Might not have been the right time to lay siege to the town to save her, but why didn't he even try and negotiate politically to get her out of there? It just feels like he wanted her gone. So, probably not the best dude. January 9th, Joan's trial begins, and before we get into the trial's details, let's take a quick break from this lengthy timeline and check in with today's idiots of the internet.
Idiots of the internet.
All right, quick note before I poke at a little fun, a couple silly heads this week. As I stated at the beginning of the suck, I may be last week's idiot of the internet. I may have grossly misunderstood a post that actually did make sense instead of being off the charts wackadoodleness. Just want you to know that I will be calling myself out again in today's Timesucker updates. Okay, so let's see if I get it right this week. User DocSpot posted a video titled Joan of Arc documentary last November that is just that. It's a Joan of Arc documentary, a story of her life and death. And DJ FX lets us know that A, he has watched it, and B, he doesn't like how she was treated at her trial, posting, "Those who condemned her will pay." Do you know how time works, DJ Effects? I'm pretty sure, and by pretty sure I mean positive, that everyone who was gonna pay either did pay or didn't already pay. Considering this happened almost 600 years ago. So maybe you should have went with something like, I hope those condemned, I hope those who condemned her did pay dearly. Or I hope those who condemned her are continuing to pay in hell, or something, something like that. Maybe add a parenthetical to your post, something like, those who condemned her will pay. Please note, I am writing this in 1431 from my time machine. User Sean O'Dwyer got very upset by the documentary, specifically by England's treatment of Joan, and he got upset enough to post, "We should all burn England and English to death. To hell with England. Destroy that devil nation." All right. Tell me how you really feel, Sean. You do realize that even though the English may have rigged her trial, they also could have easily just killed her for attacking them. I mean, to be fair, she did devote her short adult life to waging war against them. I mean, you do realize that. She did lead men into countless battles trying to kill English soldiers and the supporters of English soldiers. A little silly to think that once they captured her, they're going to want to fucking throw a parade, treat her like a queen. Also, maybe just a tad bit silly to burn the English today for what their ancestor did 6 centuries ago. There's also that to think about. A YouTube battle broke out in the comment section. Those are always fun. When people, get like real butthurt by what they're posting back and forth. Starts off with some dude named Michael shits on Joan's religion. He posts, so once again, God picks an illiterate peasant to spread his word. Odd, he never appears to anyone who is educated. First off, let me just point out that while she wasn't educated, her contemporaries, again, found her far from stupid. Found her to be highly intelligent, actually. Well, religious user Matthew Fitzgerald, he doesn't care for Michael's inflammatory words, and he writes some of his own. He says, Michael, I let God decide who he picks for his ministries, and if you look back at all the biblical figures, they were all flawed in some way. Abraham almost killed his own son for God. Moses tried to get out of it when God asked him to do it. David was a murderer, an adulterer, and sometimes a fool, so we shouldn't try to second-guess who God chooses. And then, incredibly, Michael apologizes, posting, you're right, sorry, religion is a matter of faith, and to try and hold it to logical standards is not really fair. Also, really, what do I care? It happened a long time ago, doesn't affect my life. Have a good one. Live and let live, Matthew. Sorry about that. Yeah, right, he doesn't people never post stuff like that, hardly. He reiterates his original thought. He says, Matthew, funny how your God never chooses intelligent people. So he doubles down, and Matthew fires right back. He says, Michael, that's because he gave all the smarts to you, so you can spend your time making YouTube comments, because apparently you have no depth or life. But thanks for your words of wisdom. Just what the world needs, another moron. And then Michael lets the world know that he really doesn't like being called a moron, because he ups the ante significantly, posting, Matthew, well, I'm smart enough not to believe in some man-made sky fairy, but it's obvious that you do believe in the sky fairy, which explains your lack of depth and no life. Just what the world needs. Another Jesus freak fuckhead. Piss on your God. Well, he really kicked it up with that one. Matthew, not amused. Not amused. He shoots back over, Michael, first of all, man, I don't give a fuck what you believe. You are the YouTube comment king. Now leave me the fuck alone. I love it. That's when, this is probably not a guy, based on his earlier comments, who throws around a lot of F-bombs, but that one riled him. When he said, piss on your God, he's like, you will not say that. And then he disappears from the comment board entirely, despite many other users trying to bait him back in. And he got notifications every time those extra comment replies came in. I bet he was riled up for so long. I bet for weeks, maybe just to no one in particular. He's like, fuck Michael. Fuck that godless troll. In my mind, I'm sure this didn't happen, but I like to imagine him just fucking punching a hole in the drywall of his home. His wife's concerned. Matthew, are you thinking about Michael again? No, Elizabeth, I'm fine. He's not worth my thoughts. He's not worth it. And he punches another hole in the wall. And then my favorite for this week, user Richard Wilmot, PhD, proves that his doctorate is not in joke writing by posting the following. What Joan said to shithole Charles. I've got this great joke for you from God. What did the cherry say to the cock? ... Hi, man. You guys get it? Do you get it? Hi, man. It's in hymen. Do you get it? Because she was a virgin. It's a wordplay joke. That really doesn't work as a joke the way it's written because it's too convoluted. First off, it's corny as fuck. And then also, why would Joan say that to Charles? Why would he think about, like, it's funny that she's a virgin? Because he's not a virgin? Like I don't understand, like, why would virginity matter to him? Would he be impressed by her wordplay skills, by her punniness? And why does God need to be involved in that joke? Why, like, right? I've got a great joke for you from God. Why do you set it up that way? That's very confusing. Because then you expect some religious bent to it, and there's not. There's no religious payoff. You set up God, and then you don't bring him back later in the joke. And then it just goes to a virginity joke. You know, it's just so weird. Hey, man, got this great joke from God for you. Are you ready for your God joke? Okay. Little boy asks his dad, what's in between mom's legs? And he says, it's paradise, my boy. Okay. What's in between your legs? And he says, it's the key to paradise. And then the boy goes, well, you better get that lock changed because the prick next door has a spare key. Ha ha! God wanted you to hear that. Do you get it? God thought you would enjoy that. He thinks it's funny that your wife is cheating on you. Do you get it? God doesn't like you. But rather than add further misery directly to your life, God thought it would be better if he told me a joke to tell you that would annoy you, if in fact your wife is cheating on you. If not, well, you know what? Mysterious ways. Truly, God works in mysterious ways. Silly old Dr. Dick. Dr. Dick Wilmot, joke doctor. Humor surgeon, PhD in knee slappery. Double PhD in tomfoolery. All right, let's get out of here. Let's get back into some Joan, which is a weird thing to say, since Joan is the name of my mother-in-law. And I've been talking, a lot about Joan's pussy today. I mean, not my mother-in-law's, but Joan of Arc's. But I have been talking about some Joan puss, And I hope my wife, Lindsay, hears me say that. Hope she hears me talking about sweet, sweet Joan puss. God, so nice, so soft. Hope Lindsay hears that and throws up. Maybe I really am an idiot of the internet. Let's get out of here. Let's get back into sucking on some sweet, sweet Joan.
Idiots of the internet.
All right, now I'm worried that my mother-in-law is going to listen to this episode because she does sometimes. So, Joan, if you're listening, I don't think about your sweet puss. I'm sure it's fantastic, but I try not to think about it. And now I am thinking about it, which is probably, now I've said that, now I can't not think about it. So that's weird. All right, let's get back to Joan of Arc. Joan's on trial. 60 assessors, 60 dudes with nothing better to do than decide if Joan is a witch or not. 40 of whom will attend each day of the trial's public sessions. These people are drawn from the University of Paris, mostly Dominicans, priests. This trial is financed by those loyal to England, so, it's a fucking sham. That's not good for Joan's chances. Church law states that all people under 25 accused of heresy must have a lawyer, but this teenager is denied a legal advocate, forced to defend herself in front of a rigged jury. So, it's a kangaroo court. Many historians cite this trial as the first important, widely publicized witch trial and burning in Europe. Her trial, its verdict, and the publication of her example unites as a catalyst for 3 centuries worth of zealous, often hysterical witch hunts, amounting to theatrically cruel execution of as many, check this out, as many as 100,000 women, in the words of one historian. A vast holocaust, in that historian's words. Damn, that's a lot of killing over nonsense. Joan has been charged with 3 primary indictments. The first of these is that she used magic, because she claimed to hear voices from St. Michael, St. Margaret, and St. Catherine. It was these voices told her to dress as a boy, fighting for the French in the 100 Years' War against the English. The charge against her states that the voices were actually demons. Aha! Instead of saints. Yeah, you got tricked, Joan. You've been talking to the devil. The devil's talking about your hymen, not God. Second indictment affirms what was actually true. She was headstrong and speaking out against her faith. The reason this was a crime is because she acted inappropriately as a woman towards the church at that time. She dressed as a boy, fought in a war, took communion as a male, and that horrified the judges and people of her day. The third set of accusations reflected Joan of Arc's pure obedience to God. It just said she does not submit herself to the judgment of the church or to that of living men, but to God alone, which she claimed to know through diabolical voices. Heresy, witchcraft are the 2 most important actual charges. February 21st, 1431, the first public trial is held. Joan is taken to the streets to her trial in shackles because her leg shackles are so tight. She can't even be marched, or she can't really walk, so she's just kind of half dragged to her trial location. She's still refusing to abandon her men's clothing, right? She claims God has not given her permission yet to go back to women's wear. This poor woman, brave, courageous, loyal, but also clearly mentally ill. The trial is strenuous. Her accusers ask difficult questions meant to trip up the Maid of Orleans. More often than not, she's asked more than one question at a time, and they would not repeat themselves. Which has got to be confusing. Each day of the trial goes on for 8 to 11 hours of absolute nonsense. Here are some excerpts from that trial. Will you place your hands on the Holy Gospels and promise to speak the truth and answer to all questions put before you? I do not know what you wish to examine me on. Perhaps you might ask such things that I would not tell. Will you swear to speak the truth upon those things which you are asked to concerning the matter of faith about what you know? About my mother and father and what I have done since I have taken the road to France, I will gladly swear. As for my revelations from God, I will say nothing, not to save my head. What priest baptized you? Master John Binet, as far as I know. Is Master Binet still living? I believe so. How old are you? 19, I think. Recite the Paternoster for us. I will gladly, if you hear me in confession. Where do you expect to die? Wherever God pleases. For myself, I do not know the time or the place any more than you do. So this kind of shit goes on. But just like 11 hours. 11 hours a day asking herself for 2 weeks. And then, she answers the questions better than her inquisitors had hoped for. So then they moved her trial from the public area to her cell. So people are less inclined to get on her side and revolt when they eventually burn her, which they clearly intended to do, in my opinion, from the very beginning. There was no way she was getting out of this. From March 10th to March 17th, she's interrogated in her cell a total of 9 times. March 25th, Bishop Cauchon tells Joan that she can attend Palm Sunday if she'll agree to wear women's clothing. She refuses. Misses the first Palm Sunday of her life. April 15th, the bishop, in an unusual gesture, sends Joan a piece of carp for dinner, and then she becomes very ill and thinks that he tried to poison her. Historians probably think it was just, most likely a foodborne illness from the lack of hygiene and treatment of food back then. May 2nd, but, still just interesting. Maybe he did try to poison her. May 2nd, Joan is publicly admonished for failing to submit to the church, wearing male clothing, and practicing witchcraft. So she's brought back in public to be shamed on these charges again. May 9th, the bishop threatens to torture Joan to get her full confession. The Inquisition favors the rack. They're threatening her with the rack now. They're going to extract secrets, They have the operators standing by, preparing to pull her bones out of joint. And I guess she doesn't even flinch. Just like, all right, do what you got to do. May 24th, she's publicly accused of witchcraft again. They're ready to burn her. She decides to confess to her sins, agrees to put on women's clothing to avoid the flames. So she gets a little nervous towards the end. Says she'll never, wear men's attire again, never pick up arms against the English again. She's emotionally wrecked. She's taken back to prison. She's terrified about what's to happen to her. But then on May 28th, a couple days later, she's like, nope, I'm going to fucking stick to my guns. God hasn't told me I can dress like a woman, so she goes back to dressing like a man. And this is what, they say got her killed. This is the reason. They're like, well, she fucking did it again, so now we got to kill her. So, the bishop is personally offended. 2 days later, March 30th, she's taken to be burned alive in the old market, for heresy, because she won't stop dressing like a man. So that was like the official reason she was eventually killed, was just specifically for dressing like a dude and not stopping dressing like a dude. She's brought out in like a rough tunic, kind of gray blackish, and on the mitre, which she had upon her head, this little crown thingy, they wrote the words heretic, relapse, apostate, idolater, and then a little placard set before the bundles of wood that bore the legend, Joan, who had herself named the maid, liar, pernicious person, abuser of people, soothsayer, superstitious woman, blasphemer of God, presumptuous, unbeliever in the faith of Jesus Christ, boaster, idolater, cruel, dissolute, invoker of devils, apostate, schismatic, heretic, hymenbragger. I made up that last one, but the rest of them were on there. And then the fire is lit, and legend has it, a lot of weird shit happened. Now, this seems very kind of folklorish to me, but this is what people said they saw. A lot of people who watched her die said that they saw, the word Jesus written in the flames, in the fire in which she burned. Supposedly an English soldier who had been particularly vocal about his hatred for her. As she burned, succumbed to a rapture so intense it left him insensible. Later, when he was revived with the aid of strong drink, he spoke of seeing a white dove flying from the direction of France at the moment she was giving up her ghost. While her body burned, she kept repeating the name of Jesus over and over to give her strength. Another legend, the executioner, who had been instructed to incinerate her clothes, shoes, plates, spoon, whatever belongings she had, at the very end with every scrap of her flesh, and then throw that ash into the Seine River. I think I was saying it's Seine earlier probably, but Seine River, found it impossible to burn her organs supposedly or reduce them to ashes. He kept trying to re-burn them. That was that legend of the 3 burnings. And he believed he witnessed a miracle. And supposedly by noon, the executioner was on his knees before a priest weeping for his lost soul over the horrific crime he'd committed. And then the 100 Years' War continued for 22 years after her death. And then in 1435, the Treaty of Arras was signed between the Duke of Burgundy and King Charles VII. Philip recognized Charles VII as King of France, and in return, Philip was exempted from homage to the crown. Charles agreed to punish the murderers of Philip's father, Duke John I of Burgundy. England's military weakened under the leadership of the boy king Henry VI, only 14 years old in 1435, ruling now without a regent. And then Charles VII took back the Duchy of Normandy in 1450, and after the Battle of Castillon in 1453, the English did not officially sign a peace treaty, but they did just leave France other than that port city of Calais, and the war is over. And then, when Charles VII had the English kicked completely out of France, then he has Joan retried in death. She is found innocent of all charges on July 7th, 1456, so that's nice, but, 25 years too late. And then way later, April 18th, 1909, hundreds of years later, she is beatified, which means she's recognized officially by the Catholic Church as a blessed person. It's a declaration made by the Pope that like a deceased, lived a holy life or a martyr's death and is now definitely dwelling in heaven. And as a process, the beatification consists of a years-long examination of the life, virtues, writings, more than 1 year, and reputation for holiness of the servant as a servant of God under consideration, blah, blah, blah. It's like a saint light. It's like sainthood light. And then on May 16th, 1920, Joan is canonized by the church and made officially a saint. She's canonized by Pope Benedict XV, and concluding the canonization process that the Sacred Congregation of Rites instigated after a petition in 1869 by the French Catholic hierarchy. Took 51 years to get all the paperwork done. Man, you thought the government would move slow. 51 years, 489 years after she dies, she's made a saint. And that takes us out of this beast of a Timesuck timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
Wow, what a Game of Thrones type suck, right? Like many sucks, I found myself intrigued more by the times Joan lived in than by Joan herself in a lot of ways. Not that she wasn't incredible. Sorry to my French time suckers. I know I have some for the words, but motherfuck. I will say that is the hardest thing by far of doing Timesuck. Sometimes I get jealous of podcasts that do like one, like the Dollop, all U.S. history, only U.S. history. Or like my buddies at Small Town Murder, always a murder story, usually in America. Because then you don't have to fucking worry about the weird-ass French words. So, but I know that most of you don't care about that much. You like you like to learn the history, like to learn the gist of the story like I do, and you like to be challenged. And so, these are definitely challenging. Man, 13 known engagements is what Joan fought in. Her troops were victorious 9 times. And then also in addition to that, at least 30 different cities, towns, and villages surrendered without a fight when she approached their army. So that's pretty cool. She was a skilled horseman, swordsman. Tactically, she did know how to direct armies and place gunpowder, artillery, which is impressive considering her lack of proper military training. She did, according to war historians, she never pulled off like a major upset against an army with superior artillery. All 4 of her defeats occurred when the enemy matched her artillery strength, but she was an aggressive and competent military leader. And again, very impressive considering her age and background. And the time she lived in, man, full of so much chaos, so many deals being made, alliances formed. That was the most interesting part to me. Treaties signed and then broken over and over and over again. And then, in the end, she's tried by a bunch of old men, none of whom ever fought in battle. Some kangaroo court. Everything's questioned, including her virginity once again. And then she's put to death essentially for just dressing like a man. I mean, I know we have plenty of problems in the world today, but man, our problems aren't shit compared to the problems they had back then. I mean, I know there are innocent people on death row. I know there are innocent people behind bars, but I do feel like for the most part, like there has to be, some evidence against you to, be improperly imprisoned. You know, you had to be at least kind of like wrong place, wrong time. You had to be very unlucky. But man, back then, you didn't have to do anything. They could just be like, yeah, we don't like the pants you're wearing. You got pants on. So, fucking, all right, put them on fire. Burn them. You got pants on. All right. So let's take another look back at this crazy time in the world's history with today's top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 8. What if I just had a stroke right now and just went to wrong numbers? Number 17. Number 6. Number 8. No, number 1. Joan of Arc's military success against the English and English allies in 1429 when she was just 17 years old, turned the tides of the 100 Years' War against the English and paved the way for King Charles VII to take the throne of France and kick the English out for good. Number 2, Joan was for sure a virgin. She had that sweet hymen tasted. Oh, God. Tested over and over again. She didn't have it tasted ever. Angels checked in on her regarding that hymen. The Royal Court of France gave it a look over. The Inquisition gave it a look over. You know, there are rumors that she was raped, but historians chalk these up to a mistranslation during her trial. So if you're like, wait a minute, her hymen actually wasn't intact, they don't think that was true. They don't think anyone ever got to her when she was imprisoned. Joan of Arc, number 3, is in fact Saint Joan of Arc. She was not made a saint until nearly 500 years after death. Small consolation, you know, for the man she helped crown king, not doing shit to help her during her trial. Number 4, Joan would have never been allowed anywhere near the future king of France had it not been for prophecies around, you know, pertaining to a virgin, a woman of France, saving them, especially that one attributed to Merlin, a wizard, who supposedly stated that a maid would come from the forest to save France. And number 5, new info. Let's talk a little Joan of Arc pop culture. Several films have been made about Joan of Arc over the years, and most have been panned. In 1999, there was a 4-hour miniseries titled Joan of Arc, starring Lily Sobieski, with a 10% favorable rating amongst critics. That's not good. And a 58% favorable rating from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Victoria Alexander of filmsandreview.com said Sobieski doesn't have a clue, so that's not good. And there was also the 2.5-hour-long 1999 Mila Jovovich, Joan of Arc, The Messenger. 30% favorable rating from critics, 58% for the film as from the audience. Kenneth Turin from the LA Times said of the film, nothing less than a miracle saved France. The Messenger tells us, and nothing less than a miracle would be needed to rescue this film from itself. Terry Lawson from the Detroit Free Press says, what an unholy mess. And this is my favorite. Widget Walls of needcoffee.com says, I know less about Joan of Arc now than I did going into the film. So I didn't watch those. I went way back, and I did watch a film from 1928. It's a Danish-directed French silent film called The Passion of Joan of Arc. And I wouldn't have known about this film if I hadn't have done this suck, so thanks for suggesting it. 98% favorable rating amongst critics. 93% favorable rating amongst the audience, even though it was a silent film that apparently also didn't even have an official score. At least not one that's known. When it was viewed in 1928, a live orchestra would play whatever the head of the orchestra thought suited the film best. I recommend watching it accompanied by System of a Down's Mesmerize and Hypnotize albums. No, that's a terrible choice. Actually, Messe de Notre Dame, I think is how you say it, by the 14th century composer, and I'm not even going to try and say this fucking hornet's nest of a name. Guillemedemachaut. The Frenchest of French, all French names. He's a composer. I don't know that much about composers, but apparently he was well known. He was an ancient, and you can find versions of it on YouTube, Spotify, etc. It's a masterpiece of medieval music, from what I read. Originally performed at masses. Many consider the performance of Renée Jean Falconetti, who played Joan in the film, to be one of the single greatest, if not the single greatest, acting performances of all time. The film was controversial in its day. Director Carl Theodor Dreyer premiered the film April 21st, 1928 in Copenhagen. Then in that fall, it debuted in Paris in edited form. The Archbishop of Paris, the French government, worked together to cut the film down from 110 to 82 minutes. It was protested in Britain for depicting Joan's British captors too harshly. I love when people do that. Just give me a fucking break. It's been hundreds of years since this happened. You're like, nah, it makes us look bad. No. Make the British soldiers smile more. Make them more friendly. That'd be like Germans getting mad about like a World War II depiction of Hitler. Like, make him a little less angry towards the Jews. Make him a little happier. What? Why? It's fucking. That's what happened. On December 6th, 1928, the film's only negative is destroyed when the Berlin studio that housed it burned down. Carl Dreyer then recut the film from negatives of alternate shots, originally unused takes. And then in 1929, the lab, those negatives were stored and burned down. How crazy is that, man? Joan burned down, and so did the first two cuts of her film. The original version of the film was lost for decades, and in 1951, a copy of the negatives of the second cut was found, but Dreyer himself did not care for that version. Then in 1981, an employee at the Dikemark Mental Institution in Oslo, Norway, found a canister containing the original cut of the film in a janitor's closet. How cool is that? Apparently, the director of the institution in 1928 was also a published historian and requested a cut of the film. Got it. It got forgotten about. And thanks to that, now you can watch this lost masterpiece for free on YouTube. Roger Ebert praised the film and said, "You cannot know the history of silent film unless you know the face of Rene Falconetti." In 2010, the Toronto International Film Festival released its Essential 100 list of films, which merged one list of the 100 greatest films of all time as determined by an expert panel of Toronto International Film Festival curators with another list determined by Toronto International Film Festival stakeholders. And The Passion of Joan of Arc was ranked as the most influential film of all time. The lead of the movie was, there's legends around the movie, was so cruelly directed by the director to evoke the pain of Joan's persecution and trial that she stopped working in film after that. It was only her second film, and then she was like, nope, done. She returned to theater after its production. So check it out, give it a little look-see on YouTube, and that's it for today's top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Joan of Arc has been sucked. Holy shit, my brain hurts. That was a long one, man. Next time I do a shorter suck, if you're like, oh man, that wasn't as much suck as I wanted. You remember this one. You remember this epic fucking long-ass time suck with so many French words. I gave it my best. I'm sure some of you will write in with some updates, but just know I tried my best. I really did. Big thanks to Harmony Vellicamp, Jesse Dobner, Reverend Dr. Josh Krell, Alex Dugan, the Bit Elixir team, Danger Brain, Merch Maestro, Eric Radiker, Lindsey Cummins, and just the entire Timesuck team for their help. Huge thanks to Heather Rylander this week for kicking me off on this giant Joan of Arc suck. And this Friday, we got another bonus episode. Edgar Allan Poe. Yes, we are back in America. Oh, my mush mouth is so happy. So happy. What was up with that dark, creepy fuck of a writer? You ever seen a picture of Edgar Allan Poe? Looks more like a serial killer than an author. He was a literary giant, made the short story popular in America, considered to be basically the inventor of American detective fiction. He lived an odd life. He was the first American author to try and make a living off only his fiction. He was a trailblazer. And he had 2 dicks, and we're going to explore both of them, both over 10 inches long and 7 inches in girth. He had 2 thermoses in his pants. Flaccid. Very impressive. That's not true. But what is true is he's basically the father of American horror, and we love horror here on The Suck, so we're going to suck his strange life this Friday, all of it. And now, let's find out what you suckers have been drawn to this past week, and let's throw myself under the bus. I'm getting called out this week on some Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
All right, Timesuckers. Time for me to wallow in some shame, eat some crow. Turns out I may have fucked up in numerous ways in regard to last week's Japanese Suicide Forest episode, which is unfortunate because I felt really good about that one. For starters, my favorite idiot of the internet comment in weeks may not have been idiotic. I may have completely misinterpreted it. YouTube user Eamon Ali posted under the trailer for the horror movie The Forest, a movie that is supposed to be set in a Japanese suicide forest. He posted, boycott this movie. They are turning actual mentally ill people who committed suicide with grieving family members into evil spirits and scary ghosts. This is so offensive. Please don't watch this. Mental illness is a huge issue in Japan. Stop taking away its importance. And I made fun of Eamon for thinking that the ghosts of mentally ill people who'd committed suicide were used in filming, which may be ridiculous for me to do that. It was ridiculous if he thought that. And many Timesuckers wrote in, including Cassie from Kansas City, who said, listening to the Suicide Forest suck, and I'm pretty sure that last idiots of the internet meant that the production company was profiting off real people's tragedy instead of creating a fictitious setting for the movie. Like half of the marketing is already done if you're setting a film in the suicide forest. It's like setting a fictitious love story that ends in lovers finding each other in the World Trade Center rubble right before the tower collapses. They just thought it was in poor taste. But I'm sure, Suckmaster, you already knew that. This was just a test. I didn't. Suck on my wayward son, Casty from Kansas City. Sorry, Casty, I have let you down. Or have I? Maybe I, you know what? Now that you've mentioned that, it was a test. It's a test. Just testing you. Wasn't Lucifina tricking me. Megan Henderson reiterated Casty's statement, writing, "Hey, Dan, just listen to Suicide Forest podcast. It's amazing, except your idiots of the internet portion. The last one that you couldn't get over. The guy talking about the mentally ill people being turned into monsters. Even just from hearing you read the comment, it doesn't sound like he thinks that's what literally happens. To me, LOL. It sounds more like he is upset that mentally ill people have been portrayed or turned into, the movie itself as in monsters. The fact that anyone would interpret that comment into him literally believing the director hired a necromancer is bizarre to me. Just my 2 cents. Love your show. Hail Lucifina. Thanks, Megan." Okay. All right. Megan and Casty and so many others. I think I know what happened here. Sometimes for comedic entertainment value, the comic in me really just wants something to be true. It's a good example of cognitive bias, that I try to fight and sometimes I lose the battle. Basically, the thought that Eamon actually believes that spirits of mentally ill people who committed suicide are then somehow used in a film, that some kind of necromancer brings them into some, filmable existence and gets them to follow, a director's instructions. I wanted him to believe that so badly for my own comedic entertainment that I think I just overlooked the more obvious probably answer that, he didn't want them exploiting the deaths of mentally ill people for profit, which is, that makes more sense. So thanks for calling me out. I will work harder to not just see what I want to see with YouTube commenters going forward. Also, I riled a few time suckers up with some Japanese mispronunciations. Sherry Cortez, many other time suckers wrote in about a pronunciation struggle, I had with last week's time suck, saying, "Dear Reverend Dr. Professor Sucker, MD, you and your pronunciations." Being a Japanese studies minor in college and writing her thesis on the samurai, I screamed every time you mispronounced daimyo. It isn't, I can't remember. I think I blacked out whenever you said it. The proper pronunciation of daimyo is like so. Daimyo, like yo-yo, what's up, homie? Everything else was pretty on the money. It was just that one word that had me going into seizures. That's all for now. Good job on the samurai history. It's hard to put together a 1,000-year history in the space of a few minutes. I barely scratched the surface with 100-plus page paper. Damn. Bravo, master of the suckage. Well, thanks for that. Time sucker Ted Samuel reiterated this message saying, "Dan, you mush-mouth motherfucker." I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure daimyo is pronounced, daimyo. Or daimyo, not damya, as it sounded coming from you. But that's the way I've heard it from other sources. Keep on sucking. Hope that the book I sent you helped the samurai info you presented. Yes, Ted. Thank you for the samurai book. Putting a samurai suck together on the calendar right now. Well, you and Sherry, a lot of other time suckers are correct. Yes. The correct pronunciation is daimyo. I think I'm saying it right now. I wrote it out phonetically for myself as daimyo. Daimyo. In my defense, I did look up 3 different pronunciation videos for that word, and all 3 sounded differently. This is the trouble, man, with like foreign words. Like I have found the dictionary.com, for those of you who have pronunciation struggles of your own, they do a great pronunciation, little audio MP3 for all the words in that dictionary, and they also break it down into a phonetic spelling. But when you're going to like names of cities, towns, geographic regions in other countries, not as easy to find those. And then also there's that whole thing of like, they can be pronouncing it in the way you would say it in that language, which can sound a little silly trying to do it in your language. Or it can be like, instead of the Americanized version, as far as dialect, it can be like the British version, Scottish, Irish, Canadian, South African, Australian, New Zealander, so it's tricky. But I do want to get better at it, and I will say, what I focus on putting together these sucks, my first priority is to, work on like the narrative, make that better. Then some comedy, make sure it's, factual, make sure there's some comedic value in there, make sure it's, informative in a way that's able to be learned. And then I will admit the pronunciation is the smallest priority given for me, but I clearly need to keep working on it. All right, one more Japanese update this week from Japanese-American timesucker Linda Rivera Matsuo, who wrote in saying, Hazimemaste, I think is how you say that. I watched some videos. Hazimemaste. Suckmaster, which means nice to meet you in Japanese. Just listen to your Aoki Gahara episode. As a first-generation American of Japanese descent, I cringed through the entire beginning of the episode with your pronunciations. But all is forgiven. A for effort. Thank you. Languages are hard. Fucking yeah, they are. Just wanted to give you another tidbit that you might find interesting. I know you said you intended to do a samurai episode. I just wanted to let you know that at the end of the seppuku ritual, the end is not actually the beheading. Along the lines of the Japanese belief that the soul is in the belly, the reason to cut the belly open is to show your Lord that your belly isn't black and that you meant no ill intent, even if you were being sentenced to suicide for something that was not your fault. Few people are said to have fully completed the ritual, which is to actually reach inside your belly and pull your guts out to show them to your Lord. Wow. Just made it that much more hardcore. Along the lines of people that follow Bushido, you might want to look into the Yakuza, their role after World War II and what the balance is with the government now. Interesting stuff. Keep up the good work. Always look forward to new episodes. Hail Nimrod. Send my love to Bojangles. Well, thank you, Linda. That was an intense update, man. And Yakuza are also on the possible topic list. Yeah, very interested in that international crime syndicate. Hail Nimrod to you. Bojangles is most happy. Last update today. I know this is a long suck today, but I wanted to include this too. It's about virtue signaling. Because I've been throwing the term out recently, and Timesucker JT had some thoughts about it, about my use of it. JT wrote in saying, hey, artist formerly, currently, and likely futurely known as Dan, I just wanted to write in a bit about a topic you have talked about recently in the Idiot to the Internet segment, virtue signaling. Even ignoring the political use of the phrase, I have always found the way people talk about virtue signaling to be somewhat, I guess, inconsistent. To start, I actually agree with you for the most part, and then I have always found it makes me irritable when I read a comment chain, or even worse, multi-paragraph Facebook posts that always boil down to, I sure am sad that this horrible thing happened. That has nothing to do with me, and I just want you all to know that my thoughts and prayers are about this sad thing, even though it doesn't matter if you know about my thoughts. When I read these proclamations, my first thought is always that the person posting this is just doing it for attention or to make something not about them suddenly about them. However, over time, I've begun to wonder just how intentional virtue signaling is, because just to use you as an example, and many timesucks, you spend some time in the episode talking about how you feel about what something did, or what someone did, whether it's the serial killer of the week, saying that they're a terrible person who should be capitally punished, which for the record I tend to agree with, or even in the latest suck about the Aoki Ahara, when you commented about the Logan Paul video. Don't get me wrong, he's a douche, but you taking time to tell us, but we're sorry, there's trying to figure out the sentence. But was you taking time to tell us that you think it was douchey of him to do what he did any different from the YouTube commenters saying that they think it was bad of him to do it? I know. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yep. I'm not saying that you should by any means stop giving your ethical opinions on things. In fact, just the opposite. I think that it is the humanity of the show, but I do have to wonder how it is different from virtue signaling in other ways. I'm not trying to be accusatory or slam your hypocrisy or anything silly like that. Honestly, I just think that it's a poorly defined term that has gotten passed around too much. All that said, I've always maintained a general policy that I would rather hear a disingenuine caring thought than I would a genuine harmful thought. So I hope this made sense and that you keep taking those idiots of the internet to task. Keep on sucking, JT. Thank you, JT. Yeah, that was a lot of info, but great info. Sorry that I stumbled a little bit there in the middle. And yeah, man, you really made me think with that one. I was like, God, I guess I do kind of do that. I do see your point about expressing my opinion sometimes being the same as virtual signaling. To me, I guess I was trying to differentiate it. It's totally cool, I think, to show support for someone if they ask for it, or if your support adds to the conversation, or if you're letting someone just you admire know that you support them from a genuine place or support their cause, etc. To me, it's virtue signaling when the gesture seems like very obvious and hollow. Like, I guess an example I would use, like if you're anti-gun and there's a school shooting video and you leave some comment like, how many kids have to die before something is done? Why aren't we taking this issue more seriously as a nation? As someone who doesn't own a gun, I wish that everyone else would lay their weapons down to reduce the chances that this stops happening. No more guns equals no more shootings. Like when someone posts something like that, while I don't personally agree with their commentary, I respect them seeming to have a real opinion. It feels thought out. That to me is not virtue signaling. To me, it would be something like, I don't think kids should be shot at schools anymore. It's wrong. I don't agree with kids being shot. To me, it's just so dumb. It's like, yeah, no shit, idiot. We all know it's wrong to do that. But that's just my, I guess, interpretation of it. Because defined by Wikipedia, it's a little different than the example I just used. It's the conspicuous expression of moral values done primarily with the intent of enhancing standing within a social group. And that's hard to figure out because you're talking about motive. You have to prove motive, I guess, with virtue signaling. Like is someone saying, let's say someone says, fuck Trump. Are they saying that because they really do hate President Trump and they don't care who knows it? Or are they virtue signaling, which I think a lot of that often is? Are they saying it because they just want people who they value socially to know that they agree with them because they want to increase those people's opinions of them? So it's really not about their feelings about this political person. It's about them wanting to be approved or appreciated by other people they think feel that way. And that's impossible to know. For me, with so many people opposed to the death penalty, I get nervous, to use your serial killer example about how they should be killed. I actually am not virtue signaling there because I actually get worried that I'm going to just kind of piss people off because I know that a lot of people are very adamantly anti-capital punishment in any case. Like they don't think anybody should be given the death penalty. And if I thought you guys all were definitely pro-death, then I guess that same thing could be virtue signaling because I'm playing to the home crowd, so to speak. I don't know. Maybe I've made this more confusing, but I see what you mean. I see what you mean, and I just love that you made me think. That's what I love about the updates. I love that you constantly make me reassess, reevaluate. Man, this podcast has made me grow so much as a person. Even like this week, I get so frustrated at moments with trying to figure out how to say foreign words, but I'm a lot better at it than I was 2 years ago, and I wouldn't be if you guys didn't bust my balls, and maybe I'd be fucking railing about virtue signaling, and maybe I would be hypocritical if you didn't call me out a little bit, JT, so I appreciate it. Thanks for challenging me. It's so important that we all challenge each other and keep each other in check, and I respect you guys always do it so respectfully. So, hail Nimrod. That's all for the updates this week.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Have a great week, everybody. Take a second to honor those who have died fighting for their countries. Make sure your ween is nice and clean if you have one. And if you don't, if you got one of those hymens, go to battle because apparently it's very helpful in war. And keep on sucking.